like, we have to adapt. Like, there's not just one specific way to serve people.
Yeah.
There's not just one specific way to disciple people. I think when you're doing that, you're limiting yourself. It's so important to meet people where they're at. Yeah, the way we do that is just relationships.
This is Journey with Care, a podcast by CareImpact, where curious Canadians find inspiration to love others well through real-life stories and honest conversations. What if the very comfort we find in like-minded communities is also what blinds us to the full richness of faith and understanding? This question struck me deeply as I considered my own journey. How often have we mistaken comfort for growth, only to realize that embracing diversity in faith and life enriches our own walk with Jesus and broadens our horizons? I was part of a vibrant church community that felt unstoppable. We were full of passion, diving into the teachings of speakers and influences within our church expression. After Sunday services, we'd go to a restaurant, we'd sit for hours, dissecting sermons, creating our own teaching sessions, and bouncing ideas off one another back and forth. It was energizing and exciting. We thought we were building something unshakable, totally different from anyone else, a foundation of truth and purpose. Reflecting now, I see both the strength and limitations of that time. That community had provided us with certainty and a strong sense of belonging, and we pursued our faith with undeniable passion. However, we were also inadvertently building a bubble, one that was comfortable, reassuring, but ultimately restrictive. Over time, it became clear that this bubble was not just keeping us from growing, it was also keeping others out. My perspective began to shift when I realized that we weren't as special or unique as I had once felt. This realization came not from a place of disillusionment, but from an understanding that there was a richness and diversity that we were missing. I started to listen more to stories and experiences from outside our bubble. Each story was a revelation, showing me that different church experiences and walks with Jesus were not wrong, but essential. I needed these diverse perspectives to grow, not just intellectually, but in my relationship with Jesus. Now, the bubble didn't burst all at once. It deflated slowly with each new conversation, every story that challenged my assumptions about what it meant to follow Christ. I began to rebuild, not just what I believed, but how I approached people. This wasn't about abandoning the passion of my early community days, but about enriching that passion with the voices of others who had walked different paths. Looking back, I cherish the passion and purpose of that early community, but I also embrace the lessons learned from stepping outside that comfort zone. Today, we explore how echo chambers limit empathy and how embracing diverse perspectives leads to deeper, richer connections. Joining us today are Shannon and David Steeves, newlyweds from diverse cultural backgrounds, demonstrating the power of unity in diversity. Shannon serves as the regional manager at CareImpact here in Winnipeg, facilitating deep conversations between churches and communities. David is the next generation pastor at Rose Church here in Winnipeg, nurturing young people's faith across diverse cultures. Together, they'll explore how diverse experiences can enrich faith and fellowship, also bringing in some of their marriage experience. We're excited to learn from their journey today. But Wendi, I'm going to hand it over to you now to get our conversation started.
All right, David and Shannon, so good to have you here. But before we dive in, I just want to ask you kind of a random, crazy question. But if you could instantly pick up a new skill or hobby without practicing, what would it be?
Oh, I know mine. I'm a grandma at heart, so I think mine would have to be like knitting or crocheting, something where I can just like sit and just chat with the ladies, you know?
I think carpentry.
Oh, wow.
Jesus was a carpenter.
Okay.
I just want to walk in his footsteps.
Right.
No, but I mean, imagine just being able to build a house. Mm-hmm. Just boom. You know?
Yeah. What would you build?
A house and a barn and a garage.
Oh my gosh. So we're going to have a farm?
Something like that.
That could be fun.
Well, I did my internship in Tallahassee, Florida, right? And I stayed with this couple, and this man showed me this barn that he built.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like, we can do that. Some
true.
of us humans could go out and just build barns.
Yeah.
Well, David, it sounds like we want to be neighbors with you and Shannon because I don't have any carpentry skills in our family, and we could sure use some instant skills like that.
The thing with barns is anything that lives in a barn, they all end up smelling the same, and it's pretty bad. Which brings us into our conversation about
Good segue.
Good segue.
being in an echo chamber or a bubble. When do you want to kick us off with our conversation here?
That's fun.
Yeah, in our series, we are looking at the cost of indifference, and one of the things we're looking at is essentially echo chambers and being internal and just listening to similar voices and maybe not having as much diversity into our conversations, into our thought life, that may challenge us, and it's easier to stay within. Now, just in obvious form, you have to tell us a little bit. You don't look alike, and you have worked through there's a reason we've asked you into this story. Tell me a bit of your journeys into thinking outside the box, going outside your barn, so to speak, in life.
That's good.
Yeah.
So I was born in Istanbul, Turkey. So that throws a little bit of spice into all of this. But born to a Ethiopian mother, Nigerian dad. Lived 6 years there. Me and my mom came here to Canada. My mom was like culturally, just Africans just in general, especially coming into a new country, they're trying to find folks that look like them, speak like them, cook like them, dress like them. But actually, my mom was really she was okay with not being familiar, even since Istanbul and going to a church that was predominantly, Europeans and, Middle Eastern folks. And so coming here, she didn't find an Ethiopian church right away. We were actually connected with this other church that was predominantly had a lot of Caucasian Canadians and, and so right away, my mom's like, hey, be proud of your culture, the color of your skin. But we didn't chase familiarity.
Yeah.
And so that kind of just I was always kind of making friends with other folks that look different and, even going to school outside of Canada and going to the US. And, that was a part of just that journey and that upbringing.
So you were raised global boy, and I'm curious, and it's really neat to hear how your mom instilled that and gave you permission to be yourself, but also you were exposed from an early age to so many cultures. And then coming to Canada, which is maybe your fourth culture kid kind of a thing. It's not your first, second, or third. Was there a time as you were growing up here in Canada where you had to discover your own identity, understand your own imago Dei-ness in your own ethnicity in Canada? It makes sense. What was that like?
Yeah. So my two aunties came when I was around 8 years old. So I grew up with my mom in Turkey, 6 years, came here for 2-3 years. It was just me and my mom. Then my two aunties came. And so it was 3 Ethiopian women, you know what I'm saying? Grew up, and there was barely any English being spoken in our home. And so really learning the culture helped me learn who I was. And in return, I became proud of that.
And you really got boot camp on how to treat women, didn't you? And no wonder you're happily married. Shannon, I'd love to hear a bit of your story because you were actually newer to Canada than your husband. Yeah. Tell us a little bit. And now with all the politics, we're not going to go there. But at the same time, you guys are a living miracle here. Go share us a little bit of hope here.
Yeah, well, my journey here is not quite as interesting, but I was born and raised in Southeast Minnesota. And as I thought about this conversation, I was like, man, I really did spend a lot of time with people who looked just like me. And yeah, so just thinking back, man, since I was a kid, that definitely shaped my worldview. It shaped just my kind of initial impressions of people and having to kind of examine that as I've gotten older. And then moved to North Dakota for college, and that's where we met. And then I spent a little bit of time in Tennessee, so going down south, that was a different vibe. And then, just in the last 9 months or so, moved to Canada to marry him. And that has probably been the biggest, just pushing me out of my comfort zone, moving here. It's there's so many similarities, but then the things that are different, you're oh yeah, that is different, especially when it comes to faith and politics and even the kind of the presence and the influence of churches in Canada. Feeling a lot of that difference and learning about that has been a learning curve for sure.
So now you're married. Congratulations. You're a few months into this marriage. What are some of the surprises, even through your dating and new married life? Maybe it's too much on the hot seat here, but share as much as you'd like. Because I know, I'm in a cross-cultural marriage as well. Yeah. My husband came here from another country. And so there's some things that we assume are very similar because we both speak English. Right. But what are some of the things, the nuances that you're realizing, I just thought this is the way it is in living out my faith and in my day-to-day, that when you're with each other, that you're realizing, having to reconsider your assumptions?
Yeah. I think one thing maybe, I feel like communication styles sometimes. Mm-hmm. I grew up where it was communication styles, just the lingo and the casualness, even the banter type jargon. Yeah. Kind of bringing that here, are we good? Are we are we mad? Are we happy?
Right. I often thought he was mad at me, and he wasn't.
Yeah. Is this is this a joyful conversation? Right. Is this? And so we had to learn. I honestly was okay, I need to pivot and be hey, this is what I've learned. Mm-hmm. This comes from me just in my circles and being used to that. Yeah. But knowing that, I want to love you the best that I can, communicate in a way that's right. What I'm relaying the message that I want you to know. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And vice versa. Yeah, absolutely. Because as we're in the moment realizing, this is I'm feeling a type of way because of how you communicated or how your tone was or whatever it might be. Then on the flip side, there's a level of me acknowledging my own sensitivities and acknowledging, obviously so much of how we act is based on what we saw growing up or what was modeled for us. And so just because it's different doesn't mean it's bad. It's bad. And weird or wrong. Yeah. And that, I'd say that's a huge thing that we have learned, especially in the beginning.
For sure.
Yeah. Sometimes I think about hospitality wise, we both are very people, and we love hosting, but I think Ethiopian hospitality is another level. I don't know. Is this landing with you? No, do you think that's kind of been something we've learned?
I think there is a specific style in hosting people in Ethiopian households. It's and it could be perceived as not rude.
Because what I'm thinking of is what I'm more
bring
thinking,
a real
something as simple as, and this might not be related really to culture, but I think of a simple example. A couple weeks ago, we were hosting people, and I didn't really care about what dish we used to put some food in. And you're no, that's kind of it was a mixing bowl, and he's no, let's use an actual decent looking bowl. And I'm I don't really care. But for you and for your, that culture growing up, it's no, we're going to give the highest level of service and care.
We pulled out my auntie, when I tell you, she had 4 or 5 bowls that were in the top left, right corner in the back of a compartment that you didn't know existed. Yeah. until guests came.
Right. And I'm like, we can just use the Pyrex. Like, it's fine.
Right. Yeah, we're realizing like, okay,
lots of things like that. Yeah. That again, it's not bad. It's just different.
Well, I love what I'm hearing here. Even you're just doing it live right in front of me. I'm seeing echo chambers, assumptions, our baselines are colliding in each other, and not in a way that one is right or one is wrong. There's a mutuality about this conversation you're so vulnerably sharing with me. And you're right, David and Shannon. I can identify it. I have Ethiopian relatives. My sister, she brings it next level. When I'm part of Ethiopian weddings and just hospitality, it's just like I learned so much from it. I'm curious, through this, even just through your marriage, and you've had many different cultural experiences moving to Canada and everything for both of you. How has that enriched? How has that made you a better person? How has that made you more faithful to Christ and refined you as you've had these collisions, not being wrong or right, but how has that impacted your growth?
It has really revealed to me, especially, we just did a marriage conference at our church. And so this is really on my mind there too, but it really revealed to me how selfish we are as people, that we really make decisions in our best interest. And it really takes a lot of effort to kind of humble ourselves and be like, oh, okay, my way isn't necessarily the right way. Or while I believe it is true, other people believe differently. And there can be space for me to acknowledge that. I just think about, we're only 6-7 months into this, but now I get why people always said in marriage, like it really reveals that part of you that's like, we want to do what we want to do. And I get now how like marriage is such this like picture of process, I guess, of sanctification. Is like, okay, every day, like I'm laying myself down and putting you ahead of my own needs and vice versa, like that mutual submission. And it doesn't happen like naturally. I guess that's what I have to think about is my default setting is not to like put your needs first. I wish it were, and I want it to be.
And that's not different from what we are called to as the church, lay down our lives for each other, right? And so, David, you are a pastor in a church. Shannon, you are on our team doing amazing things in the city of Winnipeg with the Care Portal, working with churches. Now, let's put that into a context of leadership in churches. Leaders that are one culture, how would that impact how we're cared for, how we provide a hospitality? We're friendly, or we love this because it comes out of one lens. It's not necessarily wrong. It's not a morality issue. Let's talk to that. What does it look like for us to have one singular cultural lens through our leadership?
I think we have to adapt. Like there's not just one specific way to serve people. There's not just one specific way to disciple people. I think when you're doing that, you're limiting yourself. It's so important to meet people where they're at. Yeah, the way we do that is just relationships. Making sure that within the church, we're going out of our circles and building relationships with people in the church that don't fit that, one like Canadian, like, hey, this one, but it's like, man, have relationships, learn, and then use that knowledge into, creating systems and how to create certain conversations and how to ultimately disciple a multitude of people. And so I think it's very important, I think, for leadership to have relationship. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think as you're talking, I'm thinking about like some of the conversations I've had with church leaders is like, I think a lot of it starts with vision.
Right.
It's like coming before the Lord and asking him, okay, what's your vision for this community, for this church? And then putting those key people in those places to help carry that out. Like if our vision is to reach the city of Winnipeg, like, okay, that's our vision. How are we going to accomplish this? Like, we can't have just one singular demographic in all the roles, like, because they can't necessarily speak or relate the same way to be all things to all people, thank God that we're not, because that would be too much. But I think you have to acknowledge that and then put in that, that work, that effort to look for those people that God wants to bring in. I don't know. Does that make sense?
No, yeah. It does definitely ultimately start with vision.
Mm-hmm.
And I think humans are we're prone to chasing comfortability.
Yeah.
And that makes its way in the church. And so you're always like, you're breaking against that. Like Christianity in itself, walking with Christ, is going against the grain. And so that has to be a part of leadership in church. Be uncomfortable, right? Have those conversations with people, build those relationships. Obviously, ultimately, go to God for that vision, but like people need to be reached. And so that doesn't just stop with English speaking folks. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, there's a lot of good things that you've touched upon, and having that vision for something more than recreating myself in others. We're not looking for the image of me in others and how they should love to worship like me or act like me, but looking at who is God in the other person. But then you touched on something else that I'd like to put a finger on, is that it takes intentionality. There's some effort involved. And I wonder if that is one of the barriers that prevents us from embracing diversity more. I talk with leaders, like my family's very diverse. I'm the only white girl around the table, but people say, oh, that's diverse. Well, not really if we're not sharing that power, not really if we're not honoring people's culture and what they bring. And it's not even just like, oh, you're Ethiopian, so you must be like so-and-so. You have a unique story that came from Istanbul. And so each person comes with similar threads and fabric, but unique. But it takes intentionality. And do you think that we have become indifferent, possibly simply because it's just easier to do it our way than embrace potential rifts or storming things out and figuring things out together?
I think before you even asked that question, I was like thinking about how, all that we're saying is well and good, but like in practice, it can be messy.
Oh, so messy.
And so I think that like really gets to your point is like, it really is a lot easier to exist within, our familiar culture, our familiar demographic, our familiar upbringing. And it's a lot harder to kind of like reach across the table and be like, okay, like, what's your story? Like, I want to learn from you. And then maybe if it's like something that's hard to hear, it's like, okay, we have to grow in that emotional maturity, I think, to be willing to listen. And I say that from a place of like ongoing learning. Not that I've arrived, because it is ongoing.
Totally.
Well, and it takes the pressure off when you posture it that way. It takes the pressure off of having to, these are the steps to being diverse. These are the steps to not being insular in your thinking. It really requires just leaning in and listening and being responsive to the Holy Spirit, needing God to give us revelation, needing God to give us inspiration on how do we love each other well, and what does it mean to follow you in this. It's not how to do church so that we're not in an echo chamber. It's what does it mean to be faithful and to worship together with shared power. Let's talk on power dynamics within church, within a diverse setting. How do you work through those things? It could be ethnic diversity or gender or things like that. I'm not talking about that we should have a power struggle, but I'm sure you've experienced times where there is a power dynamic that people don't even realize they have. They hold the assumed power.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit of those experiences when you haven't necessarily been that person. What does it feel like to not be that person with the assumed prevalent power?
Yeah, coming in to ministry, I mean, being young, the youngest, like a young Black boy, and had the opportunity and the privilege to oversee a team that had predominantly a lot of older folks, right? So there's older people, they're established, they've got families. And I'm like, okay, how do I delegate? So it's like I'm working through leadership, but then also like when we're walking into a meeting, how do hey, I'm leading this meeting. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like the words I'm saying is important. This agenda is, so I'm working through like, hey, David, like you have that confidence, you're here on purpose. And so I think that's like a continued thing for sure.
Yeah.
I would say so. Really more like internally have to make sure that I'm walking in confidently, but knowing the truth of God. But yeah, there is certain moments that's like, David's the baby, and so it's
Youngest in the
the
office.
youngest in the office. And so it's like, but I think I've made sure that I'm quick to listen, but also unafraid to speak confidently as well.
I have a totally candid question, and feel free to answer it how you like. Not necessarily specific in today's moment, but do you ever feel, you said that the young black boy in the room, do you ever feel in order to be heard, you have to act more white?
Feel, yes. Is that truth? No. But it's funny because like when you say white in my head, okay, so let me go back to in 2019, I was playing football in BC. I was getting interviewed. It was like a preseason interview. It was really exciting. And so this reporter was giving me questions and, I was answering. And he's like, man, you're really like, how to articulate. And I was like, I don't think you know how that sounded. Right. So I think like, when folks say like more white, I think it's like being more articulate and more, profound or more, you know what I'm saying? And so I'm like, when in my own circles, I'm like, bro, you sound white. I'm like, bro, that's not being white. That's just being able to speak, right? Having diction, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, I know when I walk into a room knowing what I'm about to say, I've downloaded this information. I've taken the time to research. Like, I know what I'm saying and I know how to articulate my thoughts and vision. I know I'll be heard.
Yeah, no, I think that's so good. And there in those friction moments, if you call it that, are education moments that people need to lean in and realize we need to take people at face value. But I know different friends of mine of different ethnicities will say sometimes their struggle in their workplace or in society, some of those struggles, those assumptions that are thrown their way, passive aggressive, microaggressions. And it happens within the church, but we don't always realize it because we're friendly, we're nice. Like those microaggressions, maybe we can talk a little bit about that because microaggressions happen within echo chambers, happen when we're not challenging status quo or correcting or changing those things. It doesn't mean people are bad, but we're bumping into those assumptions, those false assumptions. What would you say to, it doesn't matter who in the church, about microaggressions? How would we be able to correct that or edify the church as we bump into each other and be human to human? How do we address microaggressions so we can truly love each other?
It begins with a relationship. It's really like living life on purpose. So we're Christian and we're walking with Christ and we're constantly dying to ourselves and constantly being refined. And I think a part of that is being aware and discerning, like, I've always had that thought. Is that right?
I mean, I have a different perspective.
Yes.
From where I'm at. But I think for me, when I've been trying to work on that in myself, is just like we were talking about earlier, is like having the humility to recognize that like we're not always right.
Yeah.
And that's how our experiences have shaped our worldview, and acknowledging that it's like, oh, okay, now that I like see that, I can like be willing and open to like see it a different way, or for someone to share their experience and be like, oh, I've never had to think about it that way. No one's ever told me you're so articulate. And I like, all I said was thank you. Cause I was like, oh, thanks. Like it's, you know, acknowledging that like, oh, that's a different experience that he had than I. And there's like reasons for that. And just like making that acknowledgement, I think, like you said, it comes down to being in relationship with one another and being willing to ask the questions like, oh, can, you know, like, what has that been like for you? You know, in relationship with one another.
I really appreciate your response in that because, you're right. Proximity does matter. When we are removed and we objectify, we could even do that in politics and we're like, we can't like Americans. And Shannon, we love you. If you only got to know Shannon, who wouldn't? Because you are an image bearer. You do carry the heart of Christ in that. And we could say that for X, Y, and Z, the things we see on the news, the things we read, the things we assume, things we are inherited. For myself as a settler, things I don't even question because I have inherited certain things. And I hopefully we've evolved and educated more and become less like racially divided and things like that. I would like to think that, but we're still working those things out. And what you've identified, both of you in your stories, is that proximity matters. When we get to know people and we get close enough, we also earn the opportunity to correct or confront with love. We can actually be in those moments. We're not just assaulting, saying, how dare you do this? And then we're not going to actually help create change. But when we can sit and have coffee together and say, well, this is what I'm thinking. This is what you're thinking. We glean so much from each other in proximity. However, here's the however part. That's not always comfortable, right? It means putting ourselves out there, like you said, Shannon, being vulnerable. What are some ways that you could suggest our listeners steps they can take? Maybe they are taking different steps. I would love to hear from our listeners, but what are some ways that have helped you and those in your community get closer and work through things and doing life together?
How about you?
I have one. Less of like a relational personal thing, but it's something that I've done over the last few years that I found to be helpful. I spend a lot of time on social media. I'm not saying that that's a good thing, but I've challenged myself to follow people that I know don't necessarily think or view the world the same way I do. And it's helped me think about things from a different perspective. It's helped me understand why I believe what I believe. It's helped me be open-minded on those things that are not the, you know, the non-negotiables, those other things. And just challenge me to like, just think about it from a different perspective, because if all the content I'm consuming, if it's always just this, like exactly what I want to hear, like where's the learning? Where's the growth? Where's the critical thinking? Like, what is the cost? Like, just like this title of this season, The Cost of Indifference. Like, I think about what am I missing by not taking that step to learn, to grow from someone else. You know, even if it's not going to be that I'm going to change my opinion on something, I just think about like, what relationships am I missing out on? What growth am I missing out on? And it's really helped me just in my empathy. Like, you know, this person has a really strong opinion about X, Y, Z. And even if I don't agree with it or, you know, whatever, I can see where they're coming from. And thank you, Lord, for you know, giving us this opportunity to learn from each other.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I think one for me for sure is just listening. Just like closing my mouth and listening and seeing people's hearts and noticing their tone and where they like in live action, seeing where they're coming from. You begin to realize like, ooh, I want to say a thing there. Ooh, I want to say a thing there. Ooh, why do I want to say? And you begin searching yourself. It's a tool that's like, wow, this is just being quiet helps me grow, because I notice where my responses are coming from, whether it's like, ooh, I want to defend this thing. Oh, wait, no, they're just explaining their POV. right? I don't need to like put up like, no, you shouldn't have said,
Yeah.
right? It's just like sitting and listening. And at the end, almost all the time, I have a very different way of like communicating after like sitting down and listening. And so I'm like, man, I learn a lot about who I am, what type of defenses I have, and what things kind of like, whether it's an insecurity or what, all the different things that kind of flare up from sitting and listening to people talk.
Yeah, I heard this great quote that I cannot take credit for this past weekend. The opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is selfishness. And I was like,
yeah, it's true.
In our household, we have this saying, MCS. You're dealing with some MCS. It's main character syndrome, when we want to always see ourselves as the main character and everything else revolves around us. And I think that can often be the case within Christian settings, and it takes some intentionality to get over ourselves and listen to diversity, even things that we can't agree on. But it's a muscle that needs to be developed. And you're right. I love that you brought out the security issue. Secure believers, secure churches. It's not a security on, I've got the dogma, I've got the corner on God's theology, so much as I'm secure in Christ, that in the wonder, in the mysteries of working out our salvation and understanding who God is, which will be a lifelong, eternal thing, there's room for all of us at this table. And it's not up to us to have the reservation list of who gets their word in.
Yeah,
Right, yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Well, I think we're going to end it there. Thank you so much, guys, for coming on. You lots to chew on. We're going to hit up our segment now. It's time for
Lingo.
I'm going to throw an audible here. I had a word lined up here for today, but I think we're going to do a different one because I heard it mentioned a few minutes ago, and I'm like, let's roll with that one. We're going to use the word microaggressions. Now, when I first heard this term, it's those tiny things that just drive you nuts. It's those crumbs that fall off your sandwich and get stuck in your keyboard. Micro things that cause you to be angry or aggressive. It's that wedgie. It's like, oh, or that dripping tap at nighttime when you sleep. David, Shannon, I don't know if you guys have any microaggressions like that. What are your microaggressions if you're going off my definition here?
Going off of your definition, it would be when David puts the dishes in the sink instead of in the dishwasher.
Oh, newlywed problems.
Yeah, newlywed problems, but I have equally as many.
Yeah.
So I'll raise my hand for that. I'll be the first to say I do as well.
No, sure.
Yeah, that would be going off of that definition for sure.
You got a rebuttal?
What's crazy? I wasn't even going to use a marriage microaggression.
Oh, no. Sorry, I went there.
Which is so crazy. So that's fine though. I'll take it. Microaggression. Goodness gracious, Murphy. Paper straws.
Oh yeah. It's really the only thing about Canada that I don't like.
Somebody,
is the paper straws.
we had Connect group yesterday, and somebody brought Kool-Aid jammers, and you can't even stab the thing open.
True story. When I go to the U.S. For meetings and stuff, I pack my bags back with plastic straws at restaurants.
I don't blame you.
Okay, Wendi, what is a real microaggression? I don't think that was the correct definition. So
yeah, happy to share it. Microaggressions are actually something more subtle and often unintentional comments or behaviors that actually convey an underlying prejudice or a discriminatory tone to it that we are often blinded to from our own experience. We don't mean it that way, but it's towards a marginalized group or towards an other, somebody that isn't like us. And so we might say slighted comments that come off wrong when you're the other person. They can often be something that's accumulated over time. They're uncontested, things that people will say, leading to feeling excluded or devalued. It's making the other people feel othered when we say those things.
All right, microaggressions, there you have it. Again, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having us. You guys are great.
So listeners, if this conversation resonated with you or made you think of someone that would benefit from this conversation, I encourage you to share it with them. That's how we're going to grow the podcast. And hey, remember, you can join us on our Care Impact Facebook. We have the Care Impact podcast group there where we have conversations with each other, the latest news, and you can even get your word in for the Care Lingo segments once in a while. So we would love to have you join the conversation there as well. So until next time, remember to stay curious. Thank you for joining us on Journey with Care. To get more information on weekly episodes, upcoming opportunities, or to connect with our community, visit journeywithcare.ca or find Care Impact on Facebook and Instagram. Or just check the show notes for these links and all the links related to this episode. Share your thoughts, leave us a message, and be part of a network of individuals journeying in faith and purpose. Together, let's discover how we can make a meaningful impact.